Okay. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, man. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. Put it on the shirt. Okay. That's what's up. Oh, I lost some friends today. That's what's up. All right. Just hold on 1 minute, y'all. I'm trying to see if trying to see who's gonna hop on the panel, but also I'm sharing the show. I think I'm live on YouTube and I'm live on Facebook. So I want to people on Facebook can't see the chat, but Lafayette, peace to everybody that's on the YouTube channel, and peace to everybody that's in the Facebook. Whoever pop up, I can't see it, but I'm making it relevant. So I'm using StreamYard, really this old up to date stuff for the first time, so trying to get it right. But I'm actually trying to make sure that I get the video shared to the right places. So how everybody doing? Yeah, ETM Hotel, Rennie Sean, welcome in peace. My name is Sean. Thank everybody for tuning in. I got a wonderful response today to everybody that's interested. I am live on, like I said, I am live on Facebook and I am live on YouTube. So shout out to everybody that's tuned in to either one of the channels, my Facebook page, or I see LaDosha over there representing. She in both chats. Well, she's in Facebook. She said, hey. So peace to Sister LaDosha. We appreciate you coming out. You know what I'm saying? I don't know where Brother Chill at, but let's see what Brother Chill at. See if we can get Brother Chill in. Yeah, man. So I'm live on both. I can see the Facebook comments. And I also can see what everybody else got going on. I can see that now. So just give me a second and I'm almost done sharing. And we're gonna get into it. So yeah. Chill. You see the topic? You see the topic, right? This ain't been done before. This has not been done before by anybody. Think about that. I want you to think about what you see in the title. If you can see the title, think about this ain't been done before. Yeah, this ain't been done before. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, man. I'm getting mad love right now. A couple people hit me up. This is a Mossi Warrior Clan presentation. This is your brother, Inherent Sean Calfani, the Ish Starter. As you can see, scroll right down there, available now. Spears of the Mossi Volume 1 and From Spears to Pen Volume 2. Go get your copy. The link to the book or books is in the descriptions of the Facebook video and the YouTube video, because we are live on both. I'm gonna keep saying it again. We're live on both. So I currently got a few people watching. Well, actually 35 people watching on Facebook, and I don't know how many on YouTube, but it's telling me it's either or. So I'm here to get to it. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully my sound is good. So just give me a second, and I am waiting on my apps to let me share. All right, so everybody should be able to see my screen, right? Let me know if you can see my screen before I even present. There is a little delay, so I'm gonna wait a little bit. And see if it comes up. Can y'all see that screen? Let me know if y'all can see my, hold up, let me see. Let me kind of back out of this a little bit. Let me kind of bag out a little bit. And let me know if y'all really can. I can't, because I can't see. Once I start sharing, I can't see if y'all can see my screen. All right. How about now? Put a 1 in the chat. Ah, this might be faulty. Okay. So it's not gonna let me do it on Facebook. It's not gonna let me do it on Facebook. But so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna end the Facebook, and I'm gonna continue on the Mossi Warrior Clan channel. And I get to you, Sebu Jau. I'll get to you in a second. All right, so yeah. So Facebook, I'm gonna be live on the Mossi Warrior Clan YouTube channel, and I'm gonna put it in the. I'm gonna put the link to the presentation. I'm gonna put it in. I'm gonna put it in the chat for everybody on Facebook right now. This is where I'm going. There go the link. Mossi Warrior Clan YouTube channel link is in the chat. That's where we will be, and I'm gonna get to it so we can get with Sabu Jao. I'm also gonna put it in the description of this particular video so that people can grab it from there too, and we're gonna get it cracking. Sabu gonna try to have me on here all night, man. I ain't gonna do all that. You know, I'm just answering your question. You asked a question in the Facebook group. I'm answering your question. All right, so there's the link, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna end the YouTube side of this, and then I am going to. All right, hold on. Somebody told me to post it somewhere, so give me a second. Let me post it where they need it to be. All right, so yeah, it's posted. I'm gonna end the Facebook. And then I'm gonna get it cracking on Mossi Warrior Clan. All right, so it should stop on Facebook. Let's get it cracking on Mossi. So y'all let me know, put a 1 in the chat, man, if you can see my screen. Just let me know when I am sharing. I feel like coffee right now. Okay, so y'all don't see it yet. Keynote, share. I'm giving it a second because it's got to catch up. But most importantly, I need to get a couple people over. Man, y'all gotta see Kofi response. What's the Timberrod doing now? All right, can y'all, let me see if I do this, if y'all see my screen. Man, YouTube is so far behind. They probably gonna make me stop and start over. All right, let me go change something in my settings. There we go. Y'all should be able to see my screen now. I really didn't have to quit YouTube. I mean, Facebook. All right, so everybody should be able to see my screen now. We're gonna get to it. We're gonna go through that. So here it is. The student addresses the teacher. An educator responds to Saber Wujara Iri Mi'at. Now, let's move forward. This presentation is sponsored by Wings and Fries on Jefferson Street. You ever in Nashville, Tennessee, feel free to stop by Wings and Fries on Jefferson Street. Also, this is brought to you by Granny's Banana Pudding Company. My home Angie, she run the Banana Pudding Company, and it's one of the best, if not the best, in the city. Also, this presentation is also brought to you by Spears of the Mossi and Spears to Pins from the Kofi Pi-Psi research team, and also the Kofi Pi-Psi research team itself. All right, so here's the outline. Is the introduction, the research question, hypothesis, argument, conclusion. We're going to go through this. I might be a little fast, but I'm going to try to go through this. It is a lot of information, and hopefully we can all digest it and learn from this. All right, now, here's the introduction. Sabu Jawu posted 3 days ago a question that we will deal with later. It inspired over 466 comments. Many know that I am a student and supporter of Sabre Wujawu. He's met my family and we all hung out more than he has with any of his other students. But that does not mean I have to agree with Sabre Wujawu on this subject matter. What I'm going to do today is respond critically to his question he posed a few days ago. Why am I doing it this way? Because a comment thread is no place to actually advance scholarship. So Sabre, take this as a scholastic warning shot. I had to throw that in there like a little drama. All right, so here's a research question. He posed the question. He says, who is more African? There's an image, and I'll show you the image in a minute. It's on the left. Hi, my name is Ayande. I was born and raised in an African country. I have an African name, and I speak 3 African languages. I practice local African traditions in daily life, and I observe African festivals. My parents were also born in Africa, and my ancestors are from Africa. On the right, it says, peace. My name is Anthony Jones. I was born and raised in New York, USA. I have a Roman first name, Welsh last name. I only speak English and a tiny bit of Spanish from my ex-girlfriend. I don't practice any African traditions in daily life, and I grew up in a Christian house, even though I am not a Christian now. My parents and grandparents were also born in New York, but before then, a few generations of my family were born and raised in North Carolina. My ancestors are from Africa. All right, now, all comments are welcome, but if you comment, please answer the question first, and then expound and explain your reason. So here's my attempt to answer Sabre Wujawu's question. Here's the image. The lady on the left is Ayande. She's the one who speaks 3 African languages, practices the culture and traditions, and says her ancestors are from Africa. On the right is our dear brother, Anthony from New York, who says he has Africa, his descendant from Africa, but he got people in Carolina, and now he don't practice any African traditions or anything like that. All right. He grew up a Christian. He's no longer Christian. My hypothesis. I believe Sabre Wujawu was only asking the question to provoke an intellectual conversation and to promote his beliefs in ADOS. He has argued before that we African Americans are less African than someone like Ayande. We are, in his words, converts. And as I think about his words within his context, he is all for a more progressive Americanized culture. He says we are practicing to be African, hence we do not identify with Africa on different levels. I believe he is making the push to unify an American stance to obtain a bigger goal, influenced in his new ADOS perspective and agenda. So who is more African? When observing the image and reviewing the context of the question, I immediately can answer this in a multitude of ways. On the outside looking in, if we look at the image, we know directly that the person on the right is a descendant of Africa, and the lady on the left, she is not a descendant of Africa. After making a clear observation, I can remove the image and focus on what both individuals stated next. Ayande says she speaks 3 African languages, has an African name, her parents are African, and her ancestors are from Africa. Anthony states he has a Roman and Welsh name, only speaks English, and said his parents was born and raised in New York and a few generations reside in North Carolina. He also mentioned he does not practice any African traditions. I left out the ancestry. Now, my argument, immediately when I set out to answer Wujawu's question, I wanted to make sure that I answered this from a scholastic perspective. If you study the Outer Africa theory and adhere to that theory, you have to understand that fundamentally everyone on this planet, no matter what nationality, are in some way descendants of Africans. With that being said, I can now argue against the fundamentalist approach Sabre Wujawu and others take when he begins to spark a conversation based on a new perspective. 50 to 60,000 years ago, Homo sapiens sapiens left out of Africa to populate other parts of the world. Due to adaptation, usually influenced by climate change, those Homo sapiens sapiens began to experience changes in phenotype. Some developed slanted eyes who travel far east in tan shades. Others developed wider noses and paler skin tones. Most of those people who left Africa, hair follicles also changed and began to be more straight, less curly, and or had different textures. In the last 8 to 10,000 years, a new gene began to exist. This gene, the SLC24A5 and the SLC45A2, or in layman terms, the white skin gene, began to develop, and to add the HERC2 and OCA2 gene, blue eyes, also started to exist. This became the development of a new look Homo sapiens sapien whose immediate ancestry would develop like others outside of Africa on a continent we now call Europe. Excuse the typo. Here's a quote from the Oulu University. About 99% of European mtDNAs fall into one of the 10 haplogroups, H, I, J, K, M, T, U, V, W, or X. Each of these is defined by certain relatively ancient and stable polymorphic sites located in the codon region. Haplogroup H, which is defined by the absence of an ALUL site at BP7025, is the most prevalent, comprising half of all Europeans. Now, 6 of the European haplogroups H, I, J, K, T, and W are essentially confined to European populations and probably originated after the ancestral Caucasoid became genetically separated from the ancestors of modern Africans and Asians. The average African-American genome, for example, is 73.2% African and 24% European and 0.8% Native American. The team reports online today in the American Journal of Human Genetics. Uh-oh. Hold on, y'all. I took us somewhere I wasn't trying to go. All right, we back. Now, all right, there we go. Understanding DNA and how genetic admixture works, when I reviewed the picture that Wujawa used, my mind immediately drifted toward the science of understanding who's more African. Then I have to uncover the history of Ayande's people appearing in some part of Africa that has not been determined based on a question I asked Wujawa on the post. I kept thinking about her claims on how she speaks 3 African languages and practices the culture and also claims ancestry. My response to the languages are simple. If I spoke German, Italian, and French, that does not make me European. If I practice European culture and traditions, that still does not make me European. And if my ancestors 3 generations back had been born in Europe, that still does not make me European. The more I focus on Wujawa's question, I began to ask myself, which one of my ancestors got off of any slave ship claiming to be American? 0. So when did we actually become Americans? So I started to dig into the history of America, and I went straight to the source, the 14th Amendment. Even though the 14th Amendment introduced birthright citizenship, meaning that anyone born within a country's border is automatically a citizen, regardless of the parent's nationality, this remains a controversial idea, both in the United States and in other countries. The extent to which the amendment promise of equal protection of the law is a reality continues to be debated today. In 2010, about 15% of the countries in the world, nearly all of them in North or South America, recognize birthright citizenship. Here is the birthright citizenship map. In green is yes. In orange is no. In a paler color cannot be confirmed. We look closely at the continent of Africa. We see either no, and then we have some countries who cannot be confirmed. Although I think somewhere around Tanzania, Kenya area, now a lot of that area over there is colonized, heavily colonized and influenced by the British or whoever, French. I'm gonna show you a different map. They're blue now, and in some cases In the middle, if I go back to the previous map, you can see in Africa, two small spots that are in some cases, one in West Africa, one in basically north central or mid central, somewhere around in the area. And then, of course, you see, like I said, over there in East Africa, so to say, who's allowing it. And then you have this very small area in South Africa. Small South Africa. But we don't know where Yande is from. Now, the 14th Amendment was written in 1868. So was this the beginning of us calling ourselves Americans? It took an amendment written by white people for white people who are descendants of Europe to decide when we became more than African, slave, Negro, or Black. Following the Civil War, Congress submitted to the states 3 amendments as part of its Reconstruction program to guarantee equal civil and legal rights to Black citizens. The major provision of the 14th Amendment was to grant citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, thereby granting citizenship to former slaves. Another equally important provision was the statement that nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property within due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The right to due process of law and equal protection of the law now applies to both the federal and state governments. On June 16, 1866, the House of Joint Resolution proposing the 14th Amendment to the Constitution was submitted to the states. On July 28, 1868, the 14th Amendment was declared in a certificate of the Secretary of State, ratified by the necessary 28 of the 37 states, and became part of the supreme law of the land. Now, after reviewing the evidence, North and South America, they seem to lead charge on who's who to them based on birthright citizenship. Now, when I look to Africa, a very small percentage of African countries allow birthright citizenship, and we can argue the political perspectives of those countries. When I look at West Africa, I see British, French influence and rule. That immediately informs me that our brothers and sisters there and in the South Americans and the central part that we saw do not have control over certain parts of their country. Everywhere else on the continent does not accept a Yande as an African or her ancestors. Now, when I realized that no African got off the boat claiming to be an American, it took an amendment to grant citizenship 152 years ago. I have to review Wujawa's question from a clear lens. His entire question is fragile, so much so that science doesn't fully agree with a Yande being an African, only fundamentally. And Africa does not agree with a Yande unless she resides in the heavily colonized part of Africa. And historically, we have evidence from Kemet, West Africa, South Africa, and East Africa that when a pale face, and Kemet is in Northeast Africa, when a pale face entered the land, it was their first time seeing them. And when they talked about foreign people coming into their land, they named them specific things. They said, these are these people, these are that people, or they looked at them and, we have accounts saying that from these people. Now, I did not add that to the presentation, because if I need to follow up, I'll do that. We know for a fact that Africans brought with them to the New World staple foods, certain traditions and cultural practices. We know this based on the Gullah and Sea Island people. We see remnants of Bantu in the English language, and we also know that our African ancestors had a very heavy influence on so-called America. To argue against the African presence and influence in America will put Saber in a very tough position. One I know he would justify and argue himself out of based on positions he's willing to take and say that we are no longer African based on a weak, shaky grounds. The influence of the Yoruba and Voodoo spiritually connects us to the motherland. The way we bury and honor our dead also show our Africanness. We can also demonstrate that we are actually not converts. We are reclaiming our ideal self before the slave master and slave system forbid the practices of our native lands. The African heritage of American English, Joseph Holloway and Winfred Vass aver that two major senses of this word, that is, and I'm just going to use a couple examples, to annoy or bother persistently, and a small insect are derived from West African languages. They say the sense of a bug that means annoy, as in the paparazzi's bug the celebrities endlessly, traces its roots to the Mandingo word baga, which means to offend, annoy, harm someone. Bago, they point out, is the Wolof equivalent of the Mandingo baga. Once upon a time, English speakers didn't say but Africans did. According to Robert Thomas, an art history professor at Yale University who studies Africa's influence on the Americas. Points of contention. Bujawa's name is an African. Bujawa teaches an African language. Bujawa wears African clothes. Bujawa has African ancestry. So why are we even entertaining this question on who's African? Conclusion. I avoided addressing Anthony only to focus on Ayande as a researcher. Anthony is disconnected from his natural self, and it seems he has no reason to even want to know who he is culturally or traditionally, and he is free to practice whatever he wants. So is Ayande, but that does not make her more African than him. Based on the question posed by Saber Wujawu, the evidence just does not allow for Ayande to make the claims that she makes. Science says all people have a common ancestor that links back to the continent that we call Africa. But present-day Africa overall does not accept this birthright perspective as it stands on shaky grounds. And where it is allowed, it's heavily influenced by colonizers and their influence on the Africans. Historically, in those same pocket areas, all continental Africans never seen someone of a pale skin, and they left evidence behind that confirms this. My response to Saber Wujawu's question is only to advance the conversation, and I may follow up this presentation with a more detailed response showing the African connections in America. Saber will respond, and it will be live, and I can't wait to see his response because he is methodical in his point-for-point arguments. With that being said, I am going to let Saber Wujawu up to respond because it was his post. I only set out to answer his question. Everybody else on the post, they wanted to argue. And I knew that if I said anything on that post, it was going to get washed away and the point would be lost. Although he would respond to my comment, it's just the fact that there's so many comments on there that you lose contention in the actual post topic. So he asked us, was Ayande more African than Anthony? I set out to say no, because she is not. That birthright stuff, which is a fundamentalist argument, does not apply. Where it does apply, it is on shaky grounds because of colonization on the continent. And to keep to the fact that we do have our African roots, our African cultures, and our African traditions here in America today, and even 400 years ago, and all through all of that, even the last 152 years before they amended the 14th Amendment and made it law, passed it as law, granting us citizenship, we still wasn't African Americans at that point. We were still considered African. And then our name transcended from African to slave, to black, to slave to black to Negro, all in one and the same, coming through history. So we stapled everything that we did here in the Americas as African, and then whatever came behind that. We didn't staple anything American because we wasn't searching to be this ideal person. But I'm gonna stop my share right here. We're gonna get it cracking and cooking. Oops. Let me go back because I want y'all to see my sources. All right, so there go my sources. I'm gonna put that on the screen for everybody. You can pause the video right here you can screenshot the video right here. There's a lot of information that you're going to have to deal with right here. One of the good reads would be Africanisms in American Culture. Another one would be The African Heritage of American English. Yep. Both of those by Holloway, and one is by Holloway and Winfred Vance. Study science. Make sure that you're abreast to the scientific information, because this does not dispel what he's trying to do with his question at all. I'm just set out to answer it from my perspective based on the available information that I have, and I'm going to stand on my information. Again, I got to stamp it. We are on the Mossi Warrior Clan YouTube channel, and that'll conclude that. So I'm gonna stop sharing, and I am going to see who I got in this thing. Hold on just a second, y'all. I am going to get this link over to Sable Joe. Oh, I'm gonna get you on here, Sable. You ain't got the ass. I just sent you the link. All right, ladies and gentlemen, bear with me one moment. He gonna click real quick, and I gotta get him in. So when he joins, I am going to yield the floor and let Saber speak for himself. So I hope y'all learned something tonight. That's the point of this particular bill. Like I said, I'm only here to advance scholarship. I'm checking the chat real quick. This is like X-Clan on steroids. This is dedicated to the real. Okay. Yeah, we have a lot of people who actually. I can't speak for Korea. June. I can't speak for Korea. When I have conversations with people on the continent, they tell me, come home. They tell me to come home. So I don't know. I can't speak for nowhere else. I did send him Saber. I'm just waiting on you to pop up. I bet you when I go to Africa, that's already been done by people who already been to Africa. Imagine how many times Ben have been to Africa. And his wife. They didn't look at her no different. Ben looked like, he looked like the people in Senegal because his father's from Senegal, but he's been in America his whole life. And when he came over there with his wife, they didn't look at him like that. When he went to South Africa, they didn't look at him like that. and his kids and his family. They were not looked at like that. When Ladosha, oh, I did. I sent the current leak. Hold up. When we talk to all these what we call continental Africans, they don't look at us no different. Okay, and I'm in the waiting room. All right, hold up. Let me see. Put my camera on. I don't see you in the waiting room, so let me resend the link. All right, there you go. There you go. All right, y'all. So there go Sable. The floor is yours.
All right, am I? Can you hear me?
T.
All right. Let me square away something. Why is this doing this? All right, so I'm in here now, so you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So yeah. So listen, I am actually glad that you actually went live and answered it. Really, I really appreciate it because, as you said, my post started. It received like over 300, and last time I checked, it was like 305. But I checked while you were talking, and it was way more than that. So it's a whole lot of nested comments and comments, and it's really hard to follow if somebody coming to it for the first time. So it's like it's just ran its course, but it's an important conversation, and I'm glad that you've done this and everything now. So I'm appreciating, I'm happy that you did it, and I'm happy that you did it this way. But um I was trying to tell you beforehand that I think you misunderstand the question itself, and then my motivation for the question. So I wanted to explain that to you before you did this, but we can discuss it now. So it's still all good. So um so I don't even know where to begin, but what I want to do is just straighten out the question itself. So, and I think you have it as the title. So I asked the question, who is more African? So remember, I didn't ask, is Ayande more African or is Anthony more African? I just gave two descriptions, two pieces of information about two individuals, and just asked an open question of who is more African. And so the reason why I did this, I'm gonna let you know and everybody know. The reason why I did this is because this is a 2 year discussion that I've been having for 2 years, and so I've been asking these types of questions for 2 years, soliciting natural and real responses from people. So this is like a scientific type of thing where you're actually collecting data, and so I'm getting these answers. So the same question I asked that you're addressing, I asked it 2 years ago. But what's interesting though, and let me point this out. Hold on, let me I can't see my screen on your screen. I mean, I can't I don't
Oh,
think
my bad.
people can see
I thought I had it on speaker view.
say it again.
I thought I had it where it was on speaker view. Okay, there you go.
Oh, okay. All right. Um so here's the thing. 2 years ago, I asked this very same question, but with the same information. But 2 years ago, I didn't include any picture. Okay. So I want everybody to see the description without the pictures real quick. So I'm just going to I'm going to share my screen. I mean, I don't share it. You just be able to see it. So hopefully everybody can see my screen at appropriate size, right? Yeah, okay, good. So the question is, who is more African? So what I'm doing is, this is a social media survey of how identity is perceived and defined. Okay, so we have self-identification. That's how we see ourselves and what we call ourselves. And then there's exonyms, where other people will name you and call you something and perceive you and define you as something. So there's two things going on. And so now I didn't plan this to be any 2-year experiment or anything like that. I'm just saying that 2 years ago I did this same thing, and it just happens to be I re-ask, and so I'm getting completely different answers. So anyway, here's the thing. So here's the first piece of information. Now to show this, I purposely put a blank avatar there. All right. And so I'm just going to read it. I know you read it before, so I just want to read it again. It says, "Hi, my name is Ayande. I was born and raised in an African country." And we know there's 54 of them over there. "I have an African name, and I speak 3 African languages. I practice local African traditions in daily life and observe African festivals. My parents were also born in Africa, and my ancestors are from Africa." All right. That's person number 1. And then person number 2, whose picture wasn't shown 2 years ago, says, "Peace. My name is Anthony Jones. I was born and raised in New York, USA. I have a Roman first name, which is what Anthony is, and a Welsh last name, which is Jones. I also speak English. Oh, excuse me. I only speak English and a tiny bit of Spanish from my ex-girl. I don't practice any African traditions in daily life, and I grew up in a Christian house, even though I'm not Christian now. My parents and grandparents were also born in New York, but before then, a few generations of my family were born and raised in North Carolina. My ancestors are from Africa." So now, when I did this 2 years ago, nobody had the same things to say as people are saying now. So what that does now, the first person, this person number 1, everybody accepted this person as African. Nobody questioned anything. They just said, "Oh, okay, nice. 3 languages. Okay, whatever. And it just went on smooth. Nobody had any bumps in the road with the conversation. They accepted this person number 1 as an African. No question asked. And then number 2, this person was the question that most people had about. Now, what's interesting is that now that I introduced pictures of both people, it's in reverse. And so, Sean, that's what I pointed out to you. You when you asked your question on the post, you questioned Ayande, this one, and not that one, which is a direct opposite of the post when I didn't include pictures. So what does that tell? What does that tell me? What does that tell us? That, and this gets into a larger thing, a whole large discussion, and and hopefully we could discuss it a little bit tonight. What that immediately tells us is that lookership is very influential on how we question these things. Because if I never showed the pictures, nobody would question this one. Nobody would question Ayande. Okay, hands down. And I can say that with confidence because I did it 2 years ago. Nobody questioned this one, this person. The moment I show the pictures of both people, now it's in reverse. And what's interesting is that people had a lot of questions about this person, even though there's no picture back then. People was like, "Well, wait a minute. Are they African American? Are they a result of the transatlantic slave trade?" People were asking those kind of questions for this person. There was no questions on this one. The first one. It was like, okay, she got an African name, 3 languages, parents born in Africa, ancestors from Africa. Cool. She African. That was it. So anyway, so that's a check mark for lookership. So a picture, so what we see of a person will totally change the way that we even question it. Okay, and then your response is a perfect example of that. But like I said, it was 300 some odd responses on the post that dealt with that. So everybody had a problem with Ayande, and I don't have her picture now. I know you showed it earlier, but everybody had a problem with that one because of her picture. Okay, so what is this? What does that tell us? And so the lesson that comes out of this, and I'm fast forwarding, because prior to me re-asking this question of who is more African and giving these two scenarios right here, these two individuals, previously that I asked, what does it mean to be African? Or what makes you African? And so what I noticed is that out of the 300 responses I got on my post, nobody attempted to define what is an African. You first have to define what makes something or someone African before you can even answer the question of whether or not two different things or two different people are more African than the other. So that's missing. And I was kind of shocked that out of 300 responses I got, nobody did that, which tells me something else. That informs us of something else, that people are not understanding enough to know that when you probe these questions, you have to define your terms. You have to set a definition of the terms to govern the discussion. What makes something African or not? And so in doing so, we get into the whole idea of identity. And so here's the thing, like while you were talking, I just typed this, right? So identity, as all psychologists who deal with it know, that identity is a multi-layered system. It is a multi-layered of and complex system. There's not a one thing in terms of identity. So when I say multi-layered, we identify ourselves in a hierarchy, and it's complex. So, for example, Africa, we all know that Africa is a geographical reality. We call it a continent. It's a landmass. It's a continent. All right. Africa is not a country, but we tend to talk about it as if it's a country. Africa has no citizenship. It has no polity. It has no government. No. You don't become a citizen of a thing called Africa. You don't become a national of a thing called Africa or any of that. Africa is a continent. It's a geographical reality. Today we have 54 nations on the continent. Those are polities. Those are political realities. Those are political entities, states in the global sense, not in the United States sense. And so these are independent, different countries. And so people living within these countries are citizens and nationals of those particular countries. But when we talk about Africa, we tend to talk about Africa in just a general conversations as if it's a country, but it's not. So we have this continental level of identity. That person is European, or that person is African, or that person is Asian. When we do that, we're at the level of continent. But that's very vague and very broad, a form of identity. And so that's not good enough. That's not detailed enough to be the identity of any particular person. But that's a layer. That's one of the layers. And so right here, I have continent, country, tribe. So if you go to the continent of Africa and you deal with people within countries, they identify themselves on the country level. For example, and I've typed this in some of my responses trying to explain it to people. If you go to Kenya, everybody in Kenya who's a citizen of Kenya refer themselves as Kenyans. But then you go another layer into more detail, more refined layer, And then you have different tribes of people there. You have the Luo people, you have the Kikuyu people, you have the Maasai people. All right. But all of three of them are Kenyans, but yet they have another sub identity. They have another layer where they can also identify themselves. So them being Luo doesn't stop them from being Kenyan. So these layers are simultaneous and they're blended. All right. So they're African because they are on the continent of Africa, and they're Kenyan because they are citizen and national of the country of Kenya, but they're also of the tribe Luo or their respective tribe. All right. So we have those three things going on in terms of identity. And then the three I have up top here is how we perceive identity and discuss it. So I already talked about looks. Okay. We look at somebody and then we throw them in a category. All right. Then people will answer the question of identity dealing with genetics. And you saw that. So Sean, I know you saw that all on the post where people were talking about which one is more African based on genetics.
Correct.
Then you have the answers that are based on cultural heritage.
Mm-hmm.
So you got those three things that are at play. So all six of these things are at play at any given time. And so what the question does, asking who is more African, what it does, it solicits all of these different views that people have or criteria that people use to identify someone. And that's the lesson that we can get from it. So that's why I re-asked the question to see that unfold. And that's exactly what it did. It unfolded. It has nothing to do with what you added in there about my stance with ADOS and stuff like that. What it does is real time answers that shows how people what criteria people use to identify someone. Okay, so I don't have the post pulled up because I actually didn't know you were going to do this. I would have had some things ready, but so here's the thing. For the people who use genetics, see, I don't know. So let me see if I can grab this picture real quick, because it'd be better if I had a picture up. Just give me 1 second. If I grab this picture really quick here. All right, here we go, right here. Give me 1 second, y'all. Real fast. I don't even know. I can't see the screen, so I don't even know if who all watching or whatever. So I hope people are gonna pay attention because
it's 44 people watching you presently.
Okay. So I'm not trying to be too lecturely or long-winded, but I will be because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this 2-year, and mind you, again, I didn't plan for this to be a 2-year experiment or anything like that when I first asked it. It just happens to be a question I asked 2 years ago that I saw on Facebook again. And I said, you know what? Let me ask a couple of questions similar and then revisit the question and see what happens, blah, blah, blah. So that's how it ends up. But there's lessons to be learned out of this. And so what I'm going to do is collect a couple of the responses and things, and I'm going to do a presentation. So I'm just going to kind of summarize right now, though. So y'all can see the picture. Okay, so now, again, without the pictures, nobody had a problem with Ayande, the woman on the left. Nobody had a problem with her accepting her as African 2 years ago. Nobody had a problem with that. And I know that if I'd have asked it without the pictures again, this time, the same thing would have happened. Guaranteed. Because in reading this right here, your mind would not be triggered to question that in the way that you would question it if you see this picture with that description. Okay, so what does that tell us? That puts a check mark on looks. Okay, so looks is part of the requirement that people use, or the criteria that people use to identify people. All right, And so I'm not saying any of this is right or wrong. I'm just saying that this is what we do. Okay. We use looks. All right. So now, based on looks alone, you look at these two pictures by itself, just that one layer, looks. Everybody and their mother would say Anthony is more African than Ayande. Just on that layer alone of looks, just going by looks, it's a no brainer, right? Everybody would agree that Anthony is more African than the matter of fact. People will say Ayande is not African at all. They'll say Ayande, nope, and that's what people did on the post. They're like, oh nah, she ain't not African at all. Are you crazy? Well, y'all tripping. I'm like, how am I tripping when I'm just asking a question? That's another thing. I'm asking a question, not making a claim. The question is just asking a question. I'm not making a claim for it to be refuted. It's just to be answered. So anyway, based on looks as a criteria, most people would agree that Anthony is more African than Ayande. And then some people will go further and say Ayande is not African at all. Okay. So that's on looks, the layer of looks. Now let's go to genetic ancestry. Just on that layer alone, genetic ancestry, this is where people have a hard time understanding. Because when it comes to DNA, as Sean, as you said earlier, all human beings on the planet are African. Based on the fact that every human being alive today can trace their genetic ancestry back to the continent of Africa. Okay, so ancestry, everybody's African. So on the ancestral level or the DNA level, African equals human, because all humans are African in that context, in that level, DNA. Now, only if and when people put a cutoff time to the DNA will you have any kind of different answer. So, and this is what you alluded to in your response, Sean, when you started to go into the SCL gene in terms of 8,000 to 10,000 years ago and stuff like that. So what you were doing is you're putting like if this is a human timeline, you're putting a marker at a certain time point on it and say, okay, everybody after this point wouldn't be African or whatever the case is. But when you talk about genetic ancestry, everybody can trace their ancestors back to the continent of Africa. All right. Some people more recent than others, but ultimately everybody goes back to Africa in their genes. All right. So on this level, genetic ancestry, this is very, very all-inclusive and very, very vague. Why? Because all humans are Africans on a DNA basis, DNA ancestral basis. Okay. Now, again, we can get into particulars of that because we can say, okay, what is the most recent mutation do you come from? Which is what we know in our regular conversations as haplogroups. The haplogroups that you hear people talk about are simply codes that are identifying mutations. And so what happens is genetic biologists, when they name these mutations, they name them with codes. So you see E1, B1A, M38, all that stuff that you hear, L1, L2, those are codes for mutations. And so what they do is that wherever the mutation occurred, they put a marker there in geography. So haplogroups are genetic or geogenetic. Okay, so you have that this haplogroup mutation occurred on the continent of Africa. This other mutation occurred outside of the continent of Africa. And so what some people tend to do is they use that to determine who's African, who's not, and so on. So if your lineal or your paternal or maternal line goes back to a mutation, the most recent mutation where it's not on the continent of Africa, then biologically you're not African. Now we can do that. All right. But nobody mentioned that in the responses. All right. But that's something that we have to discuss. So that's something that I'm going to discuss further in the future. So we had the genetic ancestry. All right. Then number 3, cultural heritage. So then you had some people who answered based on this layer, cultural heritage only. What cultural heritage means is that you exhibit or you express things that are behavioral to people on the continent. Because Africa, remember, Africa is a continent. It's a geographical reality. It's a landmass. And by the way, when we say African, what we're doing is the word African is is used adjectively. So the an suffix on Africa, it changes it to an adjective, basically. And so when we say something is African, we're saying that that something or someone belongs to or pertains to that geographical reality, the continent of Africa. So I can say, this rug is an African throw rug. That means that it belonged to or it's pertaining to the continent of Africa. I got it from Africa. So I say, hey, this is an African rug I got. Check it out. So cultural heritage and African cultural heritage is simply saying that a culture, tradition, and we could define culture as all the different things from language, dress, mode of food production, all kinds of things, language, everything, resides there on the continent of Africa. That's what cultural heritage means. I'm just defining it for everybody. So if you practice or if you live a cultural heritage that we see that resides on the continent of Africa, then people are identifying that person as African. So that's on a cultural heritage level. And if you go back to what Ayande said, she fits. Matter of fact, before I do that, let me keep going first. That's culture. All right. And I already discussed continent. Continent is self-explanatory. Country, we all know what a country is. And then a tribe. Now, tribe is where you get more into ethnicity. Okay, so for people who don't like to deal with tribe or even the word tribe, we have different ethnicities. Okay, within countries, and then those countries are within continents. So everyone, so these are larger containers containing the smaller container. So a continent is the bigger grouping, country is the smaller one, and then even smaller you have tribe or ethnicities. All right. So having said all of that, if we go back to Ayande's information, okay. Hi, my name is Ayande. I was born and raised in an African country. Based on this first statement, I was born and raised in an African country, then her nativity will dictate that she's African. Okay. And so this is if nativity was your criteria, then you would have to say that she's African because she was born and raised on the continent somewhere. Okay. So based on that criteria, she would be African. Then she says, I have an African name and speak 3 African languages. I practice local African traditions in daily life and observe African festivals. So based on cultural practice, that layer, you would also have to put a check mark and say that she's African. All right. So far, there's nothing said that would prevent someone from saying that this person is African on the different layers that I'm going through. Then it goes on to say, my parents were also born in Africa, which means her parents, by the criteria, they would be African. And then she says her ancestors are from Africa. So the last statement would also point that this person is African. So there's nothing in this writing, in this information, that will prevent this person from being African. But what happens when you see a picture, everything I just read wants to go out the window. And so the question is, why? That's a question that my question will spark and start to answer, get people to answer. Why is that? Why is it that when I don't see her picture, she's African, but when I see her picture, she's not African? She didn't change. I only laid my eyes on how she looks. That's what changed. So why is that?
When you
You
put the picture up to identify, when you reveal the identity of this particular person, she is not an African.
Well, hold up, wait. Listen what you just said. So again, so so
Yeah,
and I'm glad you saying that, because even with what you just said, I'm put this arrow right here.
Mhm.
You said when I put the picture up to
Yeah,
identify.
I'm doing all of your things that you have right there. I'm gonna tell you why she's not.
Okay, but wait. I just want to point that out though. Remember what I'm saying, that identity is a system. It's not a one thing. It
Correct.
is a system of
Mhm.
layers, and they're complex. So the picture is not her identity. All of these things is a
Her
person's.
genetic makeup is her identity. It helps reveal who she actually is to us. Not necessarily how she can look a million ways, because we have people that are not African. If we go look in Australia, we look at them. They black skin tone,
Up, you
but
cut out.
they're not us.
No, you cut out. Say that again. Yeah, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, what I was talking about is, if you go look at the Aboriginals and down under in Australia, they don't look. I mean, they have black skin, right? Phenotypical black skin,
Yep.
but they're not African. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Right, they're
Okay.
not.
All right. So what I'm saying, to answer the question like I did earlier, to answer the question, when you deal with her genetic makeup, she's not that. I can be born one place. I can speak French, Portuguese, German, but that does not, and I can live in Europe, but that does not make me European. I'm not a European by any stretch, form, or fashion. I can practice any cultural tradition, whatever the inception is, because the key word in the cultural heritage is practice. Meaning, today I can practice African traditions and customs, and tomorrow I can practice Buddhism or some other culture, and get into their languages and food and so on and so forth. So it's just a practice, and everyone is entitled to just that, a practice. Now, when we talk about the locale, the continent, and the country, we know specifically, based on history and how people were writing and how they were pointing and talking about people, a Yande with no face, once her identity is revealed, she is no face.
Okay, but wait. I just want you just did it again. So I just want you to understand something. See, this is why this is such a good thing to discuss. All right. And I'm gonna go further with it later, like I said. But because you're actually helping to demonstrate this. Okay. You said it again. You said once her identity was revealed just now. And what I'm trying to get across is that identity is a multi-layered system. So her identity was already given here. The only missing component of that system was looks. But identity is not just looks. Identity is a hierarchical, multi-layered system. And that's what I'm showing. That's what I'm showing these things. So wait. So I'm saying, so you can't say once her identity was revealed, because most of her identity was already revealed, because identity is not this one thing. Okay. So what I know what you mean. You mean once her appearance was revealed, but not her identity. And that's the whole point. Because remember, listen, I'm gonna tell y'all, if you all don't know right already, identity is a very complex topic. Psychologists go in hard on identity. You have identity politics and you have identity psychology. And psychologists are the ones who write about this identity, social identity, collective identity, self-identity, all these different things. And I'll recommend some books for people to read. I got them on my bookshelf. And so, and they all agree that identity is not cut and dry, black and white, up and down, this one thing. It is a
Well, here's why I say that, Joe, is because the simple fact that we are looking at the identity, whether you put it up and you say the identity with no face or you say it with the face, we are looking at this thing from the lenses. That's why I put that in the presentation, from the lenses as Americans, meaning that we're seeing the identity of this person as such based on the way the birthright laws in America, North or South, work versus how continental Africans or other countries see that same birthright clause, because they reject the birthright clause wholeheartedly. That's why you have the majority, like almost 90% of the continent, saying, no, she's not African.
Okay, so right. So now here's the thing though. Again, I when I first started off, I said that what nobody did on the post, out of 300 plus comments, nobody made the attempt to define what is an African. And that's very critical, because in defining what is an African, it would reveal all these things that I said right here that I have on the screen, at least these 6. And the only one I'm missing is nativity, where you were born. Okay. And so again, listen, I did this 2 years ago. Without a doubt and with all the confidence, I'm willing to bet the mortgage that if I were to put this up on a screen right here and you went live and we just put this on the screen and asked everybody in the audience what they felt about this slide that I'm showing right here, nobody would have questioned it. I know that with confidence because I've done it already. Nobody would say that this person, whatever she looks like this gray avatar thing right here, they would say that this person is African. Hands down, even you. I know for a fact that if I started with you with this, if you were fresh, if you didn't know, if you didn't see the picture and saw my question how I did it this time, I guarantee you, if I said, Sean, hey, I'm gonna show you something, tell me what you think about this, you would have read this and be like, oh yeah, she's African all the way. You'd be like, yep, say what would y'all, she African all the way. You would have been like, hey man, why don't you make the avatar red, black, and green and all that kind of stuff? And you have to admit that. Yeah, hold on. So let me ask you.
I mean, I'm scared to answer any question these days for the simple fact that, for real, the truth is I wouldn't answer any question without more evidence, because I've learned that if you answer too soon, science is going to change your mind.
But listen, I listen, it's going to be hard for the audience right now to answer this objectively, because they already saw what you were saying. They saw the picture, right? But I guarantee you that if you started with this and just pause and ask everybody in the audience first, would they consider this person African? Just based on this slide right here, I guarantee you everybody in the audience would say yes. Then you go forward with your presentation, and then what that does, it allows us to know what we're doing, because immediately it would tell me that once I see this picture, something changed. My answer is going to change. Now that I see her picture, now my answer is going to change. I'd be like, oh no, she's not African. So then we can start the question, well, dang, why am I changing my answer? It's the way she looks. If you want to get detailed, her phenotype will change my answer. But then we got to say, well, why? And then when you go down that road of answering that question, why, you're going to find out that identity is not straightforward. Identity is multi-layered. So let's go through the layers. So genetic ancestry, Ayan, this person is African. Now I see people in the chat saying she's not, but again, only reason why people saying they're not. Now I don't know where people stand on the out of Africa theory. All human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, come out of Africa. So at some point, another question, I'm not going to ask this tonight, but another question to dwell on is if okay, if we march backwards in time, because Sean, I know you know this, the further back in time we go, all Homo sapiens sapiens are in Africa. You agree with me?
Till, yes.
Like as we go backwards, right? At some
it's going to
right. So at some point in time, all humans are Africans that are alive at that particular point in time, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then humans start to leave. So a new question will be, at what point did the Africans stop being African? And so did they stop being African as soon as they left the continent? Did they stop being African once they left and time transpired? At what point did the African human population stop being African? And then what are we marking it with to make that determination? So again, these are questions that need to be unpacked and discussed. And so this is what this question forces people to do. So her genetic ancestry is African, but at some point, her ancestry, like everybody else who left Africa.
The continental Africans disagree with the genetic ancestry of this lady. She could be born there, but the birthright, it goes back to birth. They reject birthright. They do not accept her as a African. What they see themselves as, they don't see her that way. They see her as a colonizer. She came as a colonizer's granddaughter.
I got you. No, I don't disagree with that. But again, what you just did is you jumped. See, I'm on this level, and what you're telling me is that the people who are on the continent now will reject her as an African, but they're not rejecting the fact that she has African ancestry. They can't do that. So even with what you said, notice that I'm talking about genetic ancestry, and then what you said, you're on a different level. And so this is why these conversations need to take place, because what happens is so many of us don't understand the complexity of the layers of identity to the point where you and I are having a conversation right now, and you're jumping to a different level than where I'm at. So I'm saying, if we're going to state, I'm just isolating one at a time. So on the genetic ancestry level, right, every human is African. If we make that statement, nobody will be able to refute that. That is a factual statement that all Homo sapien, all living human beings today, genetically are African because they could trace their ancestry back to the continent of Africa. By that criteria and definition, they're African. Not by other criteria. I'm only on the genetic criteria. Now, what you mentioned is birthright and stuff. Those are different criteria other than genetics. Birthright is not a genetic thing. It's where you're born. And they call it jus sole of the soil. Yeah, of the soil and stuff like that. That's nothing to do with genetics. You know, birthright, you can be from anywhere, from any heritage background, be born somewhere and be given birthright for the place where you were born. Matter of fact, the United States does it. So and then you show some countries that do it. So, but that's a different level. That's a different conversation. I just want to point that out. So, but I agree. People will look at her and where she's at in Africa, wherever she lives in Africa, and say, okay, nah, we are this and you're that. You're not us. But it won't be saying it because of her genetic ancestry. That's all I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying. So on genetic level, every human is African. So that's not very useful to us because whenever you have an all inclusive category, it's not very helpful. That's why we don't walk around claiming to be human. I mean, identifying as human. We know we are human, but we don't use that as an identity. Because why? Because it's all inclusive. It's like, okay, duh, I'm a human, you're human. That's why we don't walk around claiming to be bipedal. Because all humans have 2 legs, or bipedal, 2 legs. So we don't identify with those all inclusive methods. So on the genetic level, it's not very informative. It's not very useful. Only an anthropologic discussion to identify that kind of stuff. That's it. So then you go down to the cultural heritage level. If now let's say this. If I were to put if we keep Anthony here, right? And everybody knows what Anthony's information corresponds to. So we're gonna keep his picture here. But let's say we took her picture out, but put a different picture, a person, brown skin, what we would see in our mind's eye as an African right here, then it would change the game. It would change everybody's answers again. And so again, what does that tell us? It tells us that in these layers of identity, the most prominent layer is looks. When it comes to us identifying people, there's more than one layer, but the most dominant layer that we use as a criteria is looks. And this just proves it. Because right now I can Google a picture of any person that lives in Africa right now and put it in place of her and re-ask the question and put this description up. And again, what would happen? Nobody would have a problem with it, which confirms what I'm saying, that it's the look that is the dominant thing that we use. And because it's so dominant, we ignore all this other stuff. We ignore it. It doesn't matter if a person doesn't even speak European languages. They speak 3 African languages. If you read her thing, she speaks 3 African languages. She practices African traditions in her daily life, observes festivals. She's multi-generationally connected to the continent, but yet she's denied an African identity when we find out what she looks like. But until we find out what she looks like, she does have an African identity. So what does that tell us? What we stripped it because of how she looks. So on the other hand, looks are so dominant that this brother over here, Anthony, doesn't do anything from all these things. No cultural heritage practice. He'd never been on the continent. He's not dwelling in an African country. He's not part of no African tribe or anything like that. So all these things are not inclusive of Anthony. These 4.
All right, real quick. So yeah. I have one that is watching the show, and he is on the continent. Now he's African.
Okay.
All right. He's saying that no matter what she says, she's not of them.
That's what I said. He said the same thing I just said earlier.
Right. He said she's not of them, no matter how you want to break it down.
Right. I said the same thing earlier. So he's confirming what I said earlier. I said people on the continent. Remember, I know people on the continent and I speak to them all the time. So
Time, yeah, you got to do it.
yeah, I've ran this across people who are on the continent right now already. So that's why I say I agree with you. I agree with you. But what I'm doing, what this does, see, this discussion does, it is a lesson. It's gonna teach people how we go about identifying people, whether it's self-identity, how we see ourselves, or how we identify others. And so what this does, it opens up for us to gain an understanding that identity is a multi-layered system. It's not cut and dry as we think. It's a multi-layered system where you have to define what criteria you're using for that identity. So again, the only reason why us over here in America, people on the continent of Africa, would deny her being African is because how she looks. Because Africans on the continent of Africa saw this and they agreed that they would consider this person an African right here. But guess what? They didn't see her. They didn't see a picture yet. But they too agreed that they would consider her African. This person right here, they would consider Ayande African. These are Africans on the continent. Every single one of them, without failure, would agree and accept this person and say, "Hey, okay, I would consider that person African." But the moment, just like we doing, the moment they see her picture, just like you said, the person in the chat did, the moment they see her picture, immediately it would change. It would say, "Nope, she's that over there, and she's not us." Immediately. So again, what does that say? So again, it tells us that.
But it
Look,
also has
okay,
worldview,
go
though.
ahead. Say it again.
It has a lot to do with one's worldview. Like how do we define somebody's worldview? How so-called Americans see Africa or Africans, or how Africans see themselves, or how Africans see those who are outside of Africa now residing in Africa. It's like the worldview is different. Like we look at things one way here, and then they're looking at it totally different. And when I say they, I'm talking about continental Africans who are wanting to speak for themselves in these conversations, and they're saying, no, we reject. You know what I'm saying? Like you have areas of study that reject the presence of a Yande coming among them and trying to practice their cultural traditions and everything else. So they immediately reject her at the door. And I think that I think that we have to take those accounts into the equation, because historically, when we take those accounts into the equation, even till this day, you still have pockets that are rejecting her coming into that particular area, no matter if she's trying to be, Yoruba, or she's trying to be Zulu. They are outing her in that perspective. So I don't know what cultural, what cultural heritage she's accustomed to over there, but they're saying no. Like we have to take that into account. Although she says what she said, right? We still have to take what we know about those traditions into account.
Right. So listen, what you're saying is like there's no disagreement. Again, what this does is it tells us what criteria we're using to determine if something or someone is African. So it's basically reverse engineering my first question. My very first question was, what makes you African?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was my first question I asked. Not you, but I'm saying that's the first question I asked. People did not answer that question. So what I decided to do was to re-ask my 2-year-old question to reverse engineer. So to arrive at an answer to the first question, but backwards, come from the other direction. So what makes a person African? Is it their genetics? Is it their cultural heritage? Is it their looks? Is it their place of birth? Is it their citizenship, etc.? And by me even asking it just now, like I did, it tells us that identity is multi-layered, because we can't use any one of those. We have to use all of them because it is a system. It comes together. It's a package. It comes together. Because okay, so looks. So what I can do, so here's the thing. I can show you a picture of what we would consider a black person and ask you, is this person African? Most people assume that the person's African, but as you said, I could show a person from Australia, never been to Africa and so on, has very dark skin, et cetera, et cetera. They're not African, but we would assume that they are because of looks. So we don't have so we're not using the complete package. And so this is what this brings out. And see, psychologists already noticed, this book's written on this, the complexity of identity. It is a multi-layered system. And this is something we have to learn and get used to, just like we have to become scientifically literate about evolution and this, that, and other. We got to become psychologically literate about how identity is perceived by self and others. And so the way it's explained is that identity is a multi-layered system. It's not any one thing. And that's what it boils down to. So if I show this on my screen again, if I were to do this, and I saw the brother, I'm assuming it's the brother you're talking about in the chat, that he said that we would accept her. It's gone too fast. I can't read it. But if so I'm gonna show this again, right? Y'all should be able to see this. You can see that, right?
See you. Yeah, you got a different lady up there though.
Yeah. Okay. So now I have a different picture, right? But I have the same information, different picture. So this right here would settle very, very, very comfortably in everybody's mind. All right. Everybody would be comfortable with this. Nobody would have any raised eyebrows. Nobody would get emotional. Nobody would do anything. This right here is perfectly acceptable. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. So the other one is not. And so the question is why? Why does that happen? The same information, but a different picture triggers a different answer. So again, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse that she fits the criteria on all of the layers. The other picture that I had fits the criteria with an exception of one layer, looks. And so because she don't fit the look layer, we throw her out of the category. But because this woman here fits the criteria of the look layer, we're willing to keep her inclusive in the category of African. See, nobody can refute that, what I just said. No matter how you feel about it, no matter what you would like to believe and like to say, that's exactly what's going on, is the layer of looks. And see, people are not like, this is not a reality to a lot of us. Like these multi-layers right here, these simultaneous layers that's going on. They're not in isolation. They all come together. And looks is I should bold this and make it big, because this layer right here is the most dominant layer that we are so accustomed of using in terms of categorization. That's what identity is. It's a way we categorize people. And we throw a label on there and then we call it whatever. And so looks plays a very, very big part. So much so that it dominates the others. And this is proof. Because again, I didn't change any of the text right here. Only thing changed was the image. That's it. Hold on, let me put. So just to show y'all, just to show y'all what would happen. So let me do something. Hold up. You laughing already? Wait a minute. So hold up. So let me do this. Okay. So if I bounce from here to here, the text is the same. The only thing that's changing is the image. The image. And so now people probably listen to me and trying to find some problem with what I'm saying, but relax, because all this shows is it proves and shows which criteria that we lean on as a crutch so much for identity and categorizing people, and that layer or level is look. That's the most dominant one.
But here's my thing, right? So I want to deal with something real quick. So let's take the recent, right, the most recent incident of someone stealing someone else's identity. We had what was it, George Washington University or whatever university this woman was teaching at.
Yeah,
she
Rochelle.
she was imposing to be a black woman, and she was a white woman.
All right, here's the difference. Identity theft does exist, whether it's on paper or in action. They call it what do they call it? Catfishing. Like people do it online now. People will put a fake picture up and whatnot. All right. So that exists, but that's different than this situation, because this particular person is not pretending to do these things on the right hand side. Okay, this person, Ayanda, her name is actually Ayanda. She actually speaks three African languages. She actually practices African traditions. She actually observes African festivals. So this is not an instance of identity theft. So I want you to understand the difference. Identity theft.
I would argue and say so. I would say it is, because those are not what she's practicing. She's not culturally tied to. It's something that she practices, as the key word, the emphasis as practices, because when she was born, wherever she's claimed to be born and reside at, and say that her people came from this particular locale, they can, because in South Africa, they basically carved out what they wanted, and then they made the slums everything else. And what we learned, based on some information that we got when Ben went to South Africa, and he actually went down there and saw the line drawn and how the living transpired, this lady can easily come out of her shell and be like, well, I'm gonna go and hang among the such and such and act like I'm one of them. But then at night she can go right on back across that little apartheid line and do whatever it is that she was doing and continue to live her life, and then turn around and say this.
Okay, so based on what you're saying, and I'm reading some of the comments in the chat, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could see that. See, I'm trying not to be really slow in the pace of what I'm saying, like, because I don't want to drag it out. Because this like a long, and it could become a boring thing in a long video. But see, here's the thing. This person on the screen, right here, right? This person on the screen is everything that the text says. Okay, so people got to understand that first. All right. So now, her name is Ayande. I'm not going to read it. Everybody can read what's on the right hand side. This description on the right hand side is this woman. Okay, so again, because that's the case, this is not an instance of identity theft. Identity theft is when you steal someone else's identity, but this is actually her identity because these are the things that she does and what she's about. This is her a description of her. Okay, so it's not identity theft. Now, everything you said though is you said that okay, she can practice it, and you said the emphasis is on the word practice right here. But she's not culturally tied to it. So what you're doing when you do that is you're adding another bit of criteria that in order to be considered African, you have to be culturally tied to the traditions that you're practicing. Culturally tied to it. And then so for whatever that means, you have to explain, you know, what that means to be culturally tied to something, to practice it and everything. So for example, nobody would have a gripe about somebody saying I'm Christian. And I doubt that you would say that I have to be culturally tied to Christian stuff in order for you to set me saying that I'm a Christian. So when it comes to certain things, we tend to kind of pick and choose what we want to throw in the tidbits to make it more strenuous, you know, to make it more detailed. But when it comes to other things, we don't. Because I guarantee you that everybody that calls themselves Christians, nobody's walking around saying, well, hey, you're not culturally tied to Christianity, so you're not really a Christian. Nobody does that. Or whatever the case is. Because they practice Christianity. So if she practices the African tradition, she has to be culturally tied to the tradition, but Christians don't. You see what I'm saying?
No. The thing about when you okay, so what I don't want to do is I don't want to compare African traditions to Abrahamics. But in the instance to answer your question, I would actually say the Abrahamics pride themselves off of conversion, right? So you don't have to be culturally tied to Christian to anything that they want. They just want your attendance. They want your affiliation. They want you to adhere to this Savior. The Lord Jesus Christ is your Savior. They want that.
Right.
But in African traditions and customs, they don't have that. So there's no selling you on this idea or recruitment.
Hey, some babalawos will disagree with you because they be hitting people up in the DM. But I'm,
you know who they are.
No. But hold up. But listen, I hear what you're saying. But if she because she practices local African traditions in her daily life, we're willing to throw in another monkey wrench and say, well, hey, wait a minute, that ain't good enough. You got to be culturally tied to it. But when it comes to a Christian practicing Christian traditions in their daily life, we don't say the same thing. Now, you're saying the reason why we don't do it in both situations is because Abrahamic beliefs is about conversion and wants your affiliation, whereas African traditions, they're not about the business of proselytizing and conversion and this, that, and the third. So you see how you set the criteria up, but it doesn't take away from the fact that somebody practice what they practice. And so I'm just pointing out that you're adding more criteria to it when it comes to the African traditions than what we would do in a different situation. And so I'm saying that see, we don't want her to be African. Let's just be honest. We don't, everybody in the chat and me and you, we don't want this lady to be African from the get-go. All right. So if I were to take away these words and just show you the picture by itself like that, we would, Africa would not come in our mind. right or wrong. We'd be like,
well, we have to add in what the people on the continent think. It's more. This argument is more so
Well, not
not a
really.
yeah, because they have their own worldview, their own perspective on how they look at things. They don't look at things how we're taught to look at things over here. So we
Not
have to appreciate their perspectives on how they're coming when it comes to these type of conversations. We just can't shadow it out and say, well, based on how we learn and what this says and that says. No, they still have their own worldview. They don't define things how we define them. So we have to look at how they define it as well. We really have to start there. And if they define it a different way, then we have to lean on them as the subject matter. Although we don't have to rely on them, we still have to do more work. But we do have to take into account what they say. We just can't dismiss it and say it can't be that because of this. And so if they say no, they reject her and say no, then she ain't.
Okay, well, I agree with most of what you said except for the last part, because that's the very reason why I took my question to actual people that live on the continent of Africa. So I compared their answers to our answers here from the lens that we are cultivated in. Because remember, here in the United States, we see things differently by default because of the racial climate that we are grown up in. Race is a very big thing here, more so than elsewhere. Has bigger degrees of it here. The whole race thing, how we see race, black, white, and this and a third. So I compared the answers that I'm getting from people here versus the answers I'm getting from people there. And what happens is when I remove the image, I get the same answers from people here and there, as long as they don't see her picture. So that's the same. That's the same. It don't matter from over there or here. Without her picture, we're all good. And so it goes back to what I'm saying right now. I'm saying we don't want her to be African. Us here or people on the continent. They don't want her to be African. When you see this picture, your mind is like, nope, she's not African. Nah, I don't even want her to be African. African don't even come nowhere near her. That's how we think. Right? Even right now. We don't want her to be African from the get-go. So when you add this information, it doesn't matter. I could put anything over here. I could put that she's 300 years old and lived in Africa and whatever. I could put whatever on this side. It does not matter. It's not going to change our minds. This lady to us is not African. And this lady to people who live on the continent of Africa right now is not African, no matter what. Why? Because they saw how she looks. So I hope people get that it's the looks that is dominating this answer, this thing. It's the look. I've done it. Like, listen, I've done this already. Like I said, I could say this with confidence and willing to bet anything. And I'm gonna show because the only thing I'm gonna do different when I talk about this again is that I'm gonna pull what the psychologists say about this phenomenon, and I'm gonna show the answers. I got over 300 this time. Last time I had like 100 something 2 years ago. So I'm gonna show the answers, show my question back then, show the answers back then, show my questions in between, and then the latest question which you're addressing now. I'm gonna show it. And all this is going to do is it's a nice lesson for us that we really need to study the psychology of identity. That's what it boils down to. And that's what I'm suggesting people to do. Study the psychology of identity. Okay. ID, like for example, if you pull out your driver's license, we call that an ID. Like if I say, hey, if you're trying to get into a club, or you're trying to buy alcohol, whatever the case is, the first thing people are going to ask you, let me see your ID. Now, your ID does not just have your picture on it. It has other information on it. So in our everyday life, we should know that ID is not just your image. It's part of your ID, but it's not the ID. It's not your identity. Is not your looks. only. And so if we study the system of identity, which is what it is, then we'll start to see these things. And then from there, we'll be able to see how the paradigm shifts as we march backwards in time. Because here in America, we got this very blanket way of identifying things through the social construct of race. Okay, I'm black, you're not black. You're white, I'm black. That's basically how we do it. And that's fully functional. That's okay for us in today's society. We're good with that. But when you start marching back in history and in other places, the paradigm shifts where they base things identity on different things because they're using the system. We don't use the system anymore. We're not used to it. So when I bring this out like I'm doing now, people are having a hard time with it. But at the same time they have a hard time with it, they can't say that anything that I'm saying is wrong. Because it's not even built that way where it is wrong. Because all I'm doing is making
you didn't make a claim, so you can't be wrong, and you didn't make a claim. You asked a question.
right.
So
Well,
that's why I can
yeah,
just say that you asked the question.
right. So, but I'm not just. You're right. I asked a question, so I can't be wrong there. But I'm saying, even with what the information presented, like people could see on the screen right now, that's not a right or wrong situation. This is just presenting this information. So I'm introducing a person to you. This, Sean, meet
Mhm.
Ayanda. She was born and raised in the African country. She has an African name. She speaks 3 African languages. She practices local African traditions in daily life and observe African festivals. Her parents are also born in Africa, and her ancestors are from Africa. So, Sean, meet Ayanda. You see what I'm saying? That's what I'm doing. So I can't be wrong. That's not a right or wrong act to do. Or, people can't say, okay, well, Joe, you're wrong. Like, duh, it can't be wrong. That's like nonsensical. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. So, but people are wrestling with this because, in this social climate, everybody wants to argue and it's either right or wrong type of stuff. No, this is a lesson. This is a discussion to actually get us motivated to deal with the psychology of identity. And now, if people don't want to do it, they don't have to do it. I'm just making a suggestion. And this is the reason why. Hopefully, what I'm saying in what you did in answering and what I'm saying right now will at least spark people to be like, oh, yo, I'm gonna have to check that out. The psychology of identity. Wow. Identity politics. What's the difference between self-identity and collective identity? Then what's the difference between endonymic labeling or categorizing and exonymic categorizations? What's the difference there? So that's what we have to get into to really, really have a fruitful discussion about it. And it's useful. Like, some people may think it's a waste of time, but it's useful because when we study history, as we do, a lot of people want to dip and dab into history, whether it's the Middle East, East Africa, West Africa. You'll at least have some more tools to understand how people perceive themselves, self-wise, and then collective. And that I deal with Kemet, and we can understand better how the ancient Egyptians or the Remich saw their neighbors and how they identified them using this identity system. It wasn't the same as what we have now. And when people do that, we're projecting and superimposing today's paradigm on theirs, and it doesn't fit. It's like fitting a square in a circle or whatever people say, a triangle inside of a square. It doesn't fit. It's not the same. And even today, like how you said us over here in America, we do it different than people who live in one of the African countries. I know that for sure because I had a conversation just the other day about this. Matter of fact, everybody I talk to on the continent, they will say that they're African, but they raised a very interesting point. So I'm gonna give you a scenario that they gave me, right? So we have two people who are native to Africa, and let's say one person is from Ghana and the other person is from Kenya, but they actually don't know each other, but they see each other in another foreign country. Let's say Italy. Okay, so both of them are visiting Italy and whatnot, right? So they run into each other. They run into each other at a restaurant, and they're like, "Oh man!" So it's not that many black people around. So they're like, "Hey, let me introduce myself to another black person." So they greet each other, and they say, "Oh, where are you from?" And what they said is that if either one of them answers Africa, they'll take it as an insult. Because if they say Africa, then it's like saying I don't feel like talking to you because you're being really vague, like you're brushing me off. So the rightful or expected answer is to say, "Oh, I'm Ghanaian. I'm from Ghana." And another person say, "I'm Kenyan. I'm from Kenya." Now, that's one scenario. Another scenario is that two people from the same place, so let's say two Kenyan people, but they don't know each other. In the same scenario, they're in Italy for whatever reason, and they run into each other. They're like, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you. Where are you from?" And they say Kenya. Another person say, "Well, I'm from Kenya too." Then what do? They go to the next level down. They say, "Oh, I'm Luo. Oh, I'm Kikuyu." You see? So what that told me when they explained that to me, they don't use Africa the way we use Africa.
Right. Well, I would say you're right. But if like my neighbors on both sides of my house and across the street are from Africa, and when I talk to my neighbors and I'm in the backyard or whatever, they're in the backyard and we're talking or whatnot, I say, what part of Africa? Well, I say, what part of Africa are you from, right? And then they'll tell me. But my other neighbor was, he says you probably. I don't ask him what part of Africa he's from. Initially, he said, "I'm from Africa," and then I asked him, "Well, what part?" You see what I'm saying? So I think that it's selective, depending on who's having a conversation.
Yeah,
Well, maybe because
I'm sorry.
I was saying maybe because it's me, because I think that when they see a black person or whatever, they somebody that looks like them, they can say Africa and it has some sense of pride. But if it's someone that's not really too familiar or relates to that, saying Africa, I get it, because I think I heard Emiket say it once before that when people say they're from Africa, they don't say that. They usually say their native tribe because people do frown upon the word Africa.
Well, so what you're saying, that's why I said what I said. So remember, in my two scenarios I just gave, these are two people who are from an African country. So this is something else that they said, which is your scenario. If a person who is from an African country runs into a person who, although they are black, they're considered black, but they know or they suspect that they're not from an African country, they will say they're from Africa to that person, just like you, just like your scenario. So a person from an African country will answer the question to you because they suspect you're not. They'll say Africa. Because to us, we got to understand, to us, Africa is another layer. To them, it's a okay, I'm gonna say it because it's another layer type of thing. Like to each other, they wouldn't say I'm from Africa. They would drill down. They would say, all the way down to the tribe they're from. But to us, being from Africa is good enough because we, in our everyday talk, in our everyday we talk about Africa as if it's a country. Can nobody deny that? I could pull up articles online. I could pull up people's Facebook posts. I could record people's conversations. We tend to talk about Africa as if it's a country. Now, we all know it's not. It's a continent, but we actually talk about it the way we use it and talk about it. We talk about it as if it's a country. People who live in the countries of Africa, they know that too. They observe that. So they use it out of what do you call it? Out of acceptance, because that's how we use it. So when they talk to us, they will use Africa and African in the same way we will. I guarantee you if you go over to an African country, as welcoming as they will be for you, me, and everybody else, they can tell that you're an American. Whether they call you that or not is, whatever, but they can tell. And because they can tell that much, the way they interact with you is going to be different than how they would interact with each other. No different that if I thought somebody was from another country, we're going to act different. We're just going to act different. Or we're going to, interact with them differently. That's just it. We do it on this side. Matter of fact, today I was somewhere where the person worked for the place that I was at, and that person walked up to help me and the people I was with, and they're from Nigeria. And we knew, based on how he was talking, before he told us, which sparked us to ask where he's from. And the thing is, he didn't say to us, he didn't say Africa. He said Nigeria. But the reason why he didn't say Africa is because the person that was with me was from Africa too. Had that person not been there, that brother would have said he's from Africa to me first. And then if I'd have pressed him more, he would have said Nigeria or whatever. But because the brother that was next to me, the person that was next to me that went to the place with me is from Ghana, he looked at him when he answered and said, I'm from Nigeria. And then the brother said, oh, I'm from Ghana. He said, he told him, he said, my wife is Igbo. He's like, oh man, what's up? And then it was like, man, it was just totally different conversation. Totally different conversation. He said, oh, have you ever been to Nigeria? He's like, I've been through it. So I'm just saying that these are social interactions that we have and we can observe. Now, why we do it, that's when you get to the psychology of all of it and identity. So all I'm saying is that these questions, I resurrected the question because I feel that it's a great topic for people to invest time in, to get to understand. And what that topic is the psychology of identity, be it self-identity or collective identity. It's a very interesting topic, and it will start to you could kind of check why you would identify this, that, and the third. And that's just an example of the thing Ayande, because like I said, if I don't show you her picture, everybody would accept her as African. The moment I show the picture, people will reject her as African. So the question is, why the rejection specifically? And the answer will be because of how she looked. Obviously, because before you knew how she looked, you accepted her. Once you know how she looked, that's the only variable that added. That's the only variable that got added in, was her looks. And so if your answer changes based on a change of one variable, then that variable is the causation of your change. Then you go further, ask yourself why. Okay, why? She fits the criteria every other way except for her looks. Man, and I'm willing to throw her in the trash can. Not to say that's wrong. See, people listening to me and be like, oh, you're doing this, you're doing that. Nah, people just got to get comfortable with what we do and why we do it. We throw her in the trash can, or I ain't gonna say it that way. We throw her out of the category of African the moment we see her picture. Hands down. Okay, so Sean, I got new. So nah, this is gonna be a long thing, man. A lot of people are saying stuff in the chat, and I'm not catching it. So I don't know if you want to turn it into a
Nah, I'm gonna end it in a minute, man.
Okay.
I think we started the conversation, so your next question will probably further the discussion because I think that you should do what you do best. And
All right. So, well, let me just summarize so that people will get, because I'm telling you, a lot of people, I know why it's done, because this makes people feel uncomfortable.
well, to get to the truth, you got to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. Hold on, give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. So yeah, you gotta entertain the audience real quick. I gotta take this call real quick.
All right, go ahead.
All right.
All right, so Giles about to take a call once he gets done. I muted you, by the way. But once he gets off the call, I'm gonna let him kind of wrap his thing up. But he posed a question on Facebook. It's got tons of comments. It's 466, probably 500 comments right now. From all different kind of people. People frustrated, upset. Some people just in agreements. They don't know what they're agreeing with. Some of them just, I'm saying that because some people will just answer, just side with it because it's Saber. And then you have other people that are, trying to tackle it from a different perspective. So it's so many different perspectives on there. Some lost, some are on point, some are further in the discussion. And I felt like the only way to properly answer this question for myself is to respond to it based on the available evidence that I actually have and why I say what I said. But go ahead, Saber.
Oh yeah, I just want to summarize. So I see you have on the screen. We must not let our ancestors down. All right. So I just want to be very, very clear that this type of questioning or question makes people feel uncomfortable. How do you know that? Listen, y'all could read the comments. I asked a question. I posed the pictures this time, and the responses, you can tell people are some people are uncomfortable. But being uncomfortable does not speak to the right or wrongness or the truthfulness of anything just because you're uncomfortable. So the point that the reason why I asked this question was to go from a different direction to reach the answer of what makes a person African. Because what we don't find in our discussions is people defining what makes somebody an African. And whatever that definition is, that definition should govern the rest of the conversations. But we don't do that. So we get all over the place. Now, if had I put a so like this right here. Let me do this real quick, Sean. Just real quick. I want to put something else up on the screen. Man, so if I put this, let me move this out the way. Where did the picture go? I'm trying to take up too. Oh, here we go. Okay, so if I were to do this, can y'all see the screen? Oh, you can't even see my. I'm sorry.
We can't see.
Okay, you should be able to see that. You see that?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, so if I was to re-ask the question with these set of pictures, let's say we start off fresh, and I re-ask the question, who is more African? The answer that I would get back would be the lady on the left. Now, so that's like an observable fact. Like we can test that. I can now y'all are already spoiled, so y'all wouldn't be a when I mean by
Answer.
spoiled, what I mean by spoiled is that y'all already are hip to the conversation. But if I was to show these two pictures and those descriptions to a fresh set of people, they would acknowledge, or they would answer and say that the lady on the left is more African than the brother on the right. Hands down. Do you agree with me, Sean? Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Now somebody in the chat said nobody would know. So I'm not saying I would show these pictures just naked, just blind like this. I'm saying with the text that I had. So this text right here, hi, my name is Ayande, blah, blah, blah. I showed a woman. And with this text right here, I show the brother on the right. If I were to do that again, hands down, people would say that the lady on the left is more African than the brother on the right. But they will also add in their commentary, they would say, well, both of them are African, but yeah, if I had to pick which one is more African, then they would say, okay, the one on the left. And we all will be comfortable with doing that. But again, the moment I change the picture, that answer would change. And so that's just an observable fact that happens. We do it. But what this question does is now it starts to probe further. It's like, okay, well, why do we do it? Why do we do that? When the same information, I'm informed of the same thing. Nothing changed but the picture. I don't know this lady. I don't know the other lady either. But yet their pictures will make me change my answer. And so then we'd be like, okay, well, man, what makes something African? What makes a person African? You know? So that's the thing. Like, and then reverse, and now I won't have to get into that tonight though. What you mentioned earlier is American. Now I don't know why you mentioned that in terms of this, but that's a good thing to bring up though. American, same thing. What makes a person an American and what makes a person African? Now, America is a country, Africa is a continent, so we can't like one for one, but the same principle is there. Like we had to define what makes an American American. So Sean, I'm gonna ask you real quick: are you an American?
I'm hyphenated. I'm an African American. It's
Okay.
a true answer though.
Okay, so you're an African American.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want you to understand something. So
Mm-hmm.
you're an African American, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is just basic language. African is used adjectively to describe American. So when I ask you, are you an American? I know why you don't want to say just yes, because
No. Richard Nixon may had an argument regarding the fact that the answer to my question. It wasn't just about me being African American. It was also about other people being hyphenated people as well. I'm hyphenated here, so that's what I am based on. You know, my ancestry, my experience in America, and my identity as a person.
all right. So remember, my question to you is: are you an American?
Yeah.
And
So I know where you're going, but
no, I'm saying. So when I asked you that, you felt the need to say that you're hyphenated. You're an
yeah.
African American. So now I just want you to understand what you did. And see, this is what I'm saying. See, I'm looking at the chat too, right? And I'm telling you, boy, people have to I swear, when you go off the air, I'm willing to go live. Cujo, Marcel, and anybody else, we can continue the conversation. And I'll open the panel up. I'll do Zoom and open the panel up. I get 100 people in there, and we can keep talking. I don't want to do this to you, Sean, and the channel to make this long. But let me just say something. I just want to explain what you just did. All right. I asked you, are you American? Okay. So, but in your answer, you gave me one level down. So you didn't give me the level that I asked. You gave me a more defined level, a more specific. You told me what type of American you are.
Mm-hmm.
You're an African American, as opposed to a different type, such as a Native American.
Right.
So again, even in our regular conversations, like I just did with you just now, we deal with these layers without even knowing it. So American is too flat, is too broad and too flat for you. That's why you didn't answer me with a yes. You had to give me more details. You said, no, I am hyphenated. I am African American.
Mm-hmm.
So these are two levels right here. Let me put these side by side. These are two levels, two levels. African American and Native American is on the same level. American by itself is a level above it. It's more vague. These are more detailed. This is more vague. That's how every single hierarchical system is made, where as you go down in levels, we call them ranks, things get more detailed and more specific. As you go up in ranks, things get more numerous and they get more vague. Just like this right here. If we were talking about just biology, about Homo sapiens sapiens, same thing. As you go down these ranks right here, from life all the way down to species, everything gets narrower and narrower and narrower, and you're talking about less and less things. As you come from the bottom and go up, you're more all inclusive. You're starting to include more things. We do it with identity, and that's what I'm pointing out. And I just did that just with you just now. I asked you a very simple thing: are you American? And you gave me the level down, a level beneath that, and said, okay, I'm African American. And so that's what Africans do to each other. They don't say African, that's a continental level. And I said, nah, I'm Kenyan. Same thing. And then if they're talking to people in the country level of Kenya, they'll be more distinct there too. They say, no, I'm Kikuyu, or I'm Maasai, or I'm Luo. So we do this. And so all I'm saying is that we need to study that it's done and why, and how useful it is. And that's it. So anyway, I ain't gonna long this out. But I do want to say though, if I guess in the chat, I'm only gonna do it if people are willing to continue the conversation, because this video is already 2 hours, and I apologize for that, Sean. but
Yeah.
but I'm willing to go live, and people could jump on and we could keep talking, because I'm reading some of the comments, and this is probably the same comments that I've seen before within the 2-year span, and we could talk about it right now. We could just nip it in the bud right now, especially with Marcel saying, "Here we go with the semantics." Like, brother, man, you don't you don't understand that semantics mean meaning. Everything has meaning. Can't get around that's an old trick. Semantics game. Nah, brother, you're gonna have to deal with this. I got a set of questions for you.
Well, yeah,
Anyway,
good bill. They can go back and view it. 2 parts to it, so it all works itself out. Started on Facebook, it ended up on YouTube. Probably hear more about the conversation as things develop. And we'll just see where it kind of goes on all levels. But it's good discussion. I wasn't gonna leave you out to high and dry. I was gonna let you get on here and get your piece in, because people don't know your perspective. So appreciate you coming on and sharing that information with us. And I'm gonna leave it at that. And everybody, that's the end of the show. And y'all take care. Shimmer Moto.